Golden Age Part 2 is here. I don't know how we're gonna split this up. I don't know if this is going to be I don't know if I'm gonna have one more video after this or two more. We'll see. But here we're talking about the second half of Volume 9 through... No, wait, that's wrong. We're gonna be talking about the second half of Volume 6 through the first half of Volume 9. Because that's where a time skip happens. We come back and like a year has passed, so we're talking about that. Seems like the perfect breaking point. It's another, I ended the last video on the fountain scene where it seems like that is the initiator of everything cascading down. And then way more so, now I'm going to be ending on a scene, the duel, where, well, not on the duel, but in that section where everything continues to fall. Is there a theme? Anyway, quick ground laying to kind of get our setting of exactly where we are. I'll just tell you right quick and then we'll get into analyzing what's going on. So in this section we begin with Griffith plotting his revenge for an attempt on his life. Charlotte gives him a necklace confirming that he has successfully won her heart, and Casca not only watches them flirt, but then she's ordered to die for Griffith if need be, which she would have done without the command. But obviously Charlotte doesn't know that, but still, like, that's gotta suck. Casca also realizes she's on her period, which is terrible timing as they're about to go into battle, because it will affect her physically, and Guts is still reeling from everything that happened in the fountain scene as well. So neither one really are themselves going into this battle. So after the fight begins and Casca is very weak, she passes out and falls off a cliff, and Guts falls too, trying to save her. This whole section with Casca and Guts in the cave, and we learn Casca's backstory, we learn a lot about what's been going on inside of Casca that's kind of motivated some of her actions up to this point. I have positive and negative to say about this. It's primarily positive, so we'll start there. First of all, her assault scene is unbelievably tragic, not just because she's being assaulted, but also because as this is happening, she's thinking about what a fool she was to believe that it could have ever gone any other way. No one would ever save her out of the goodness of their heart. Of course, there was another goal, another desire in the noble. So when Griffith showed up, shining from above, and saved her from being trapped in this fate, he didn't save her by rescuing her, he gave her a sword, and he told her to save herself. The parallels between her backstory and Guts' backstory of their assaults are striking to me. The fact that she too reached for a sword, but for her, she grasped it, she was able to get it, and she was able to fight in that moment. For both of them, that sword was the lifeblood that they relied on for their strength. For Guts, it was what he clung to make sure that he could never be trapped in that fate again. And for her, it was the thing that rescued her from that moment. The sword and Griffith. Griffith was the provider of the sword, but the sword was the thing that made her realize, I can fight for myself. I can have a future beyond this terrible, terrible fate. When she did strike the noble that was attacking her, it was very similar to Guts with the wolves, where with Guts, he raised the sword almost on instinct and seemed surprised and then kept fighting from there. And with Casca as well, I think even the narration of that scene, she said, I don't know if he fell on the sword or if I actually struck him. So for her as well, it was instinctual, and it came as a surprise for her. And this was the moment that made her stand up and want to be Griffith's sword. For Guts, it was a desperate fighting of revenge and of retaining his agency and never being allied with anyone again, so that this sort of thing could never happen. But for Casca, it was the opposite. The sword was devoted to someone, the provider of the sword. She wanted to be his sword, and now she views him in this idealistic way because he was the provider of that defense as well as that hope of life. Guts had to forge that defense on his own because he was so isolated, because he had no one to provide a sword for him. He had Gambino, who in fact provided the assaulter, essentially. So their situations are very different, and they've come to different conclusions as far as how they devoted their lives up until Griffith came into Guts' life as well. But the parallels of their scenes are striking. And I'm sure Guts sees that too, as he's listening to her recount it. As life went on with them together, if she was shaking and in shock, then he would put his hand on her and comfort her. That was the real helping hand that Griffith had provided, as she put it. The strength to get up and move forward. He provided her realization that she could fight, as well as her comfort. That was what made her want to keep the sword for him. He was what gave her a choice and a chance and a future. So I get her devotion. I get how strong her devotion and her love for Griffith is in a situation like this, where she, as a child, was saved from this terrible, terrible fate. And he is the image of that rescue and that hope. Later on, Judah will put it that it's more than just that she loves him, it's that she views him as a hero, she idolizes him. And I really see that in this scene, how that's being formed. Now as an adult, she's essentially rejected her femininity. She said, I wasn't born a woman because I wanted to be. She views her womanhood as something that both holds her back and puts her in danger. Holds her back physically because of her periods, but also makes her vulnerable still for the worst fate she can imagine. I absolutely love that Mira wrote this into Casca's story as her current struggle, not the period stuff, we'll talk about the period stuff, but the emotional, the rejecting her femininity because her femininity is viewed as a thing that someone could try to rip from her, try to use in the way that we saw in that flashback, and is still continually a risk. And so she dresses as a man. She wants to be considered one of the Band of the Hawk as a man, which again, I look at Griffith saying it's a woman's job to lay naked with a man to keep him warm. Go, Casca. Like, knowing her mental state, knowing what she went through is still just shocking to me. But I love that Mira wrote this into Casca's character, because I think that this is a realistic response to what she went through. I think she talks about dressing as a man. She talks about not wanting to be seen as a woman. She talks about essentially despising her womanhood because of how it can be, how someone could try to rip it from her, and how that's viewed by her as a continual fear that she can't shake, and that she continues to hate that vulnerability that she carries because of something that she inherently is, because of how someone else could exploit her. This is a very familiar reaction, I think. I wouldn't say it's universal, but I would call it familiar. You know, when I was 12, I dressed as in the boys section. I bought all my clothes loose, baggy, I would physically punch people that called me a girl. I'm not proud of that. It's embarrassing to admit, but it's the truth. I think the rejection of your femininity because someone has attempted to take from you because of your femininity is a really powerful thing to see depicted on page. And I really appreciate that Mira depicted it in Casca and showed how angry she is at having to deal with this thing that's completely outside of her control. Okay, let's talk about the negatives. First, a lighthearted one that I think is more funny, really, than anything. We talked about villains in the last video. Some of the minor villains are depicted as essentially bursting through the door, saying, "I'm a bad guy," and then being defeated. Sir Misogyny. Boy, is he one of those. And he's depicted in a funny, lighthearted way, but goodness. His whole role is essentially, "You there, woman, I belittle you. Rawr, I mock you for your weakness. Let me be super clear here, just in case anyone didn't get what my intention here is." Even later, the dialogue with him and Casca, it's just really not good. And he's written with a comedic tilt, so it's not like we're supposed to take him seriously, but it's certainly not a subtle use of him as an exploration of Casca's struggles. Next up to my medium complaint, which is still not really big, but it's a hang up for me, and that's the use of the period. I mean, as an external representation of, you know, of Casca's inner struggles with her body and with the way that she's perceived and the limitations that she has because of it, I get it. But also the way it was utilized, I think it's a hang up for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, periods are no joke, and being extremely weak definitely makes sense. But I don't think Mira thought it all the way through. So I'll be brief because I doubt very many people care. But if this is happening every single month, then she's tracking that. And so is the rest of the band, because she's making everybody vulnerable as a commander of a flank of their, I don't know the terminology, as a commander in their band, she's making everybody vulnerable if she's just passing out on the battlefield every month. But I don't think she does, because the more likely truth is that Casca has lost her periods. Extreme physical activity or extreme nutritional deprivation will make a period go away in most cases. Many Olympian sports don't have their periods anymore. Many extreme athletes don't have their periods anymore. Even just like fitness girlies that go like way too hard in the gym will lose their periods. So someone that's trained as hard as Casca probably has lost hers, so you could say that her periods are extremely infrequent, and that's why this one was so aggressive and so painful or weakening. But everyone in the band is treating her as if this is totally abnormal. Like even Guts, who's been there for years and works right alongside of her as a fellow commander, seems totally baffled by this very unique behavior. So, I mean, Guts isn't like the most observant guy and in tune with people's feelings and emotions, especially people that he's not close with. So, I mean, but everybody seems confused. But I think the execution is rough without any sort of foreshadowing of this being a problem, or you know, we'll see if it's continued to be a discussion after this, it continues to be a hurdle after this, or if like this is just a magical period that showed up the one time because of plot. You don't have to get hung up on this in the comments. It's just when you're talking about a series so in depth, you're going to talk about your hangups too. Last complaint, and this is the big one, and that's the visual framing around this. She has a fever, so Guts strips her and sleeps next to her to give her warmth, kind of like a parallel to what she did for him against her will, or begrudgingly, when he first came into the camp. Now he's doing this for her. I like the concept, but the execution, again, I have complaints. With Guts, the scene was all there, it was on page, and it was horrible, but it was self-censored, and the emphasis was on his emotional trauma. For Casca, the narrative is focused on emotional trauma, but the visual is focused on her angles, both as a child, as the assault is happening, and as an adult, as she's recounting it, which is a really unfortunate choice. As you can see, I have really mixed feelings about this scene. I love what Mira was going for, but the execution, I think, was quite rough. I love her struggle with her femininity, and I like the choice to represent it in these two ways. The weight that she carries, the trauma that she carries in the threat of just inherently still being a woman, represented in Sir Misogyny, and the physical limitations that come with it that she doesn't want because she just wants to be a part of the band and considered one of them and not have this other thing that holds her back represented in her period. It all comes to a boiling point where we see that her womanhood as a whole is just considered a curse to her. In both cases, with Guts and with Casca, we see a suppression of self in response to a horrible act that's been done to them. And them sharing this scene, her finally opening up and showing Guts what she's been through and how that's affected her, you know, I think that there's a lot of her story that he understands intrinsically because of what he's been through. And though he doesn't really speak very much in the scene, I think we can see that on him, how much he's taking in of what she's saying. So I would call this a really powerful scene that I love with some rough execution. Really rough execution. But right on the heels of this, we're going to continue to explore this with Griffith in a very different way, but the effects are still there for him. A disgusting king who openly did to children what was almost done to Casca. Griffith going to the king, even knowing what a foul person he was and how he's harmed those kids. And from Casca's perspective, he is her anchor. He is what grounds her and what keeps her from collapsing under the reality of seeing these children serving the king and knowing what's happening to them and how horrible it is to have to ally yourself with someone like that. So then to see him partner with the king in this way, for her, probably felt like a slap in the face. You know, like, you know what you rescued me from. How could you with him? And when she asked him that exact question, how could you with someone like him? His answer is simple. Money. He says he knows that they can keep going the way that they are and to get where he needs to be, but it would take too long. And every battle, they lose more troops. Seducing the old man is faster and easier than dozens of battles. He claims he doesn't feel guilt over the loss of the life of the troops because they chose to fight, and he'll do anything to get his dream, even put his life on the line. My dream can only be realized by building upon their corpses. And he's willing to do that, but he's unwilling to put their lives on the line and be the one person that's left unclean. What I want won't enter my grasp so easily as that. He's saying all this while he's clawing into his skin. And I'm gonna way overanalyze this scene, which might be insufferable, so I'll try to keep it quick. But much like the fountain scene, I think that there's a lot more to his words than just what he's saying. First of all, when Casca first sees him, he asked her, "Am I dirty?" This is really striking to me because he seems to be scrubbing and scrubbing himself and failing to feel clean. Like he can't get the filth off of him after what he just did. And he's still, when he tells Casca why he made this choice, but when he talks about losing more troops if they don't take this shortcut, he starts washing himself again. Like the memory of it triggers his mind into feeling desperately unclean all over again, so he has to compulsively wash. He says it's not because of the boy. He says he doesn't feel responsible for their deaths. And just like the fountain scene, I do think that he's telling the truth. But I think that there's another truth buried deep inside of him that's so deeply disturbed and affected by the child's death and by what he's just done so that fewer children would die. He's accepted that people will die, and he's willing for them to die for his dream. After all, it can only be realized by building on their corpses. And that's a worthy sacrifice. His dream must be accomplished. But if he can dirty himself to make the pile of corpses a little less, then he will. Even if it makes him forever dirty. Even if it gives him haunted eyes. Even if he tears at his flesh because it haunts him. He'll still do it. And I believe that what we're seeing from him is real, honest anguish, because we see him with the same haunted eyes and the same physical tick of clawing at his skin after Guts leaves and he goes to Charlotte. No one's watching him in that scene. He has no one to perform for. This is just him being tormented, being haunted by what's just happened, while still pushing forward no matter what. Obviously, we've seen Griffith as a member of the God Hand, so we know that he surrenders his humanity for the sake of more power. But I think that scenes like this, what we're seeing is also a fracturing of his humanity. We've seen that in the sense of what the God Hand provides, but scenes like this, I think we're watching him fracture his own humanity in a bid for power, not in this supernatural, cosmic way, but in a very human way that kind of leads to what would lead a person to the bigger, more supernatural cosmic way. He seems more human at this point in the story, in this flashback of Casca's. You know, this is years before where we are now. He seems more human, more open and vulnerable. And I do think that he means what he says. I do think that he believes that these people have accepted, like they're okay with devoting their lives to me. So I do feel that building on their corpses is necessary to get to my dream, and I will do that to get there. I think he believes that. But I think we're also seeing him being deeply affected by it. So it's both. I'll do what it takes to get my dream, and I'm okay with the cost. But also, I'm not left unaffected by the cost. It haunts me. It stays with me. I love this scene for the story. Getting better insight into Casca, what drives her, what motivates her, what's caused her to be so rough around the edges towards Guts, her frustration toward him that he's the one that Griffith chose and has devoted himself to and wanted more than anyone else, that Guts' recklessness could keep Griffith from his dream. Not only because of Guts' own recklessness, but because Guts has made Griffith himself more reckless, that Guts has changed him. And there's a lot encompassed in that really causes Casca pain. I said in my last video that I perceive Guts as the type of person who is hard to get through the walls, that he's difficult to get through the walls that he builds up. But once he has accepted you as one of his people, he's just incredibly loyal. I view this scene as that moment for him. Casca letting him in. And he understood her story, and he understood her pain far more than he let on. But he understood her, and now he's devoted to her. And he's still very Guts, egging her on to make her keep fighting, because that's all he knows in his life. You keep fighting. He may not have a gentle touch about it, but he has a gentle heart. And when Sir Misogyny shows back up, Guts is hyping her up. Oh, you don't want to mess with her. She's crazy. She'll go feral on you. And then he puts himself in the line so that she can get free. She poured out her heart to him, and now he's attached to her, and he'll put himself in harm's way for her. And he'll put his feelings aside to do what he can to help her get what her heart wants. I do think that at this point, Guts has developed feelings for her, if we want to talk about the romance side of it. I do think that at this point he has developed feelings for her, but I don't think that he really has processed that yet or really understands what he's feeling. I just think that he's devoted to her and he's devoted to whatever she's devoted to. So she has revealed to him that her heart is for Griffith, so he wants to protect her and he wants to get her to Griffith as an act of love, though he maybe wouldn't frame it that way if you were to hear him talk about it. Okay, so the Battle of 100 Men. Oh, I love this scene so much. It doesn't even rely on huge action panels as much as other fights tend to do, but rather it focuses on his thoughts of Casca before he's able to turn his brain off and go into Zen fight mode. Then we just skip to the end of the battle, which I think emphasizes the importance of what's going on inside of Guts right now, the shift that's happening in him. The unique framing of what's emphasized in the fight, I think, is meant to emphasize what's happening in him. This panel is one of my favorites so far in the series for its impact. Him sitting at the base of the tree, holding onto his sword with bodies all around him. I can feel the silence of this scene and the fear in the band when they find him that way. And Casca's desperate shaking of him, fear that she's lost him, and he stirs awake with a line, "Don't shake me, you'll just make the wounds worse." It's such a good scene. And through all this, a tenderness has formed between these two as well. A shift has happened in both of them, which leads us to Guts letting Casca in now on what's going on in him. Compared to what you're doing, me fighting with 100 men, it doesn't really matter. It ain't just you. Griffith's the same way. He's got something he'd bet his entire life on. I think that's kind of amazing. Compared to that, if I were to go out and fight 100 or 1,000 men, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal. That's what I thought. He talks about the dreams other people have, and he says, "It's like each one of those lights contains tiny dreams and hopes. That's the way it looks. Campfire of dreams. You could just scatter them by blowing, so all those little flames throw themselves into the biggest bonfire, the blazing inferno named Griffith. But, you know, my flame ain't in here. As for me, maybe I'm just warming myself by that campfire for a bit. Maybe I just stopped in by chance. As long as I have this, I'm confident I can survive any battle. That's how it's been up till now. Even before I joined the Band of the Hawk, no matter how badly the battle was lost, I myself was sure to survive. Like this time. But still, I don't really mean much. I was on the battlefield before I was old enough to understand things. The mercenary leader who raised me taught me nothing beyond how to wield a sword. I had nothing but this. But just because I didn't want to die, just because I didn't know more than how to use this, I kept fighting in battles." It harkens back to when he was a kid and he was laying there on the ground thinking, what is my place in life? What is my purpose? Where do I belong in this world? Feeling completely lost and alone. And even though in the Band of the Hawk he's found a place, he's found family, he's found love, and that's only increasing. He's only finding that more and more as he's bonding with Casca and will continue to bond with Griffith, but it doesn't change the fact that he hasn't discovered that for himself. He hasn't found an identity or a purpose beyond someone else, and he feels that he really can't go on and eat any longer until he gets there. So much has been decided for him and ripped from him that he has to go and find his place, find his purpose, find what he needs. And this, of course, was triggered by Griffith, making that statement at the fountain that he doesn't respect or consider a friend of anyone who doesn't have a dream of their own, and Guts realizing, I can't stand next to him unless I have a dream of my own. But it's also, I think, that loneliness and lack of knowing what his place in the world is that he's been carrying his entire life. It's time for him to start pursuing that. This is another one of those defining moments in the series that there seems to be a lot of. And so we go to war. This will be the final battle that Guts fights under Griffith's flag. And what a battle it is. Completely opposite of the Battle of 100 Men. This is focused on the fight. And some of my favorite pieces of art from the series are here. Guts' final battle with his band is so significant to him, and he gives it his all and reflects on the battles that have been leading him to this point to make him stronger. That this may be a huge battle, but it's not as hopeless as the situations he's faced before. I think this reflects a lot of his character in general. In this battle, we also get an emphasis on Casca's fighting style, which we saw in the fight before too, but I love how she has this strategic and quick style, how it's drawn so differently from Guts' fighting style. Griffith too gets to look that putrid king in the eyes and tell him that he's meaningless to him and just finish him off. Not to mention, during this battle, Guts broke his sword and Zod threw him a new one. Apparently our boy is keeping tabs on Guts and making sure that he stays alive for the eclipse. What? After the battle, this is another scene that I'm gonna way overanalyze, and I'm real sorry about that. After the battle, Guts shows up. He struts toward Casca, and I just perceive him in this scene as his face being totally open. You know, like his body language and the look on his face. There is an openness to him that I don't think we have seen up to this point. There's a tenderness there that I think shows that things have significantly shifted between them. I mean, obviously the other things have indicated that as well, but this page does a lot in that regard, in my opinion. And then as he's supporting her, as he's holding her up, you know, she waxes on about she writes poetry about Griffith, and you can see in his eyes, you know, he looks in the direction she's looking, and then he looks straight forward and his eyes are more resolved, like he's made a decision. And then he swoops her up. Let's go. Go meet your leader. And again, I think it's more that speaks to what's going on internally with Guts. I still don't think he fully understands how he feels. Maybe he's starting to get it a little bit. But at the end of the day, for him, right now, at this point in his life, this is what devotion looks like. You care about Griffith, I get you to Griffith. Regardless of what my feelings are, I want you to have what you want. So after the battle, the Hawks are celebrated, which is fun for everyone but these two. And we have another plan during this gathering, one that Griffith has only entrusted with Guts. It's striking to me that during the announcement of knighthood, everyone stands together but Guts, who stands outside. Obviously he's doing it because he has a role to play after the poisoning, but I think it's also very much a visual symbol of the state of the Hawk right now. Guts still admires Griffith, and he wants to see his dreams accomplished, but he also has placed himself on the outside. He knows that his time with them is almost done. Now, I was beside myself over the poisoning scene. I've seen Black Swordsman, I know he survives, but I still couldn't help get caught up in the emotion and the chaos and the what's going on. And while there's something comedic about the raging fire all around, people screaming as they're trapped in a burning building, and Griffith is having this super calm conversation with someone who is stories apart from him. Like, there's no chance that they could hear each other right now, but like, whatever, it's a cool scene. His lines are so cold. Those who die on the battlefield are not royalty, nobility, or commoners. They are the defeated who die. Ugh, it's such an incredible scene. But the aftermath, to me, is an even better scene. I've involved you in this filthy scheme, and I didn't even get my hands dirty. Which, by the way, you literally stood outside of a burning building while people were being burned alive, and you were like, sucks to be you, pal. I orchestrated this whole thing. Now I walk away dramatically in victory. But like, I get it. I left all the dangerous, taxing work to you. Do you think that I'm cruel? Guts responds with, idiot. What kind of question is that for the guy who killed 100 men? Ain't this part of the path to your dream? You believe that, don't you? So what's with this crap, now of all times? And then there's this understanding and affection that's kind of shown in the body language as well. This is another one of those defining scenes for me. Griffith is, I said this in the last video when talking about the fountain scene, I do think that Griffith meant what he said in the fountain scene. I do think that he views himself, his dream is greater than anything else, and there probably is some amount of lack of respect for someone who doesn't also have a dream like his, but I think he was putting on a mask for Charlotte, playing it up, saying those things to that degree because he wanted her to admire him. And what we see here, at least the way I take this scene, what we see here is him putting on that mask again because that's what he does. It's like what Judo spoke to at the beginning of the arc, that he'll have this cold-hearted cruelty and then innocence of a child. and you don't fully know how to take him, but you want to follow him. And I think that that's what we're seeing here, where Guts is fully aware of this scheme. He's fully aware of what Griffith is willing to do, and not just an act of defense, but an act of active, I'm going to take you down to get you out of my way. But he still wants to paint himself as sympathetic, and he still wants to be seen in this kind of way. And at least, again, this is the way I'm taking the scene. Maybe you don't take it the same way. But the way I take the scene is Guts calling him on it, saying, take the mask off. I don't need that. You don't have to play that game here. I know who you are. I can see what you've done, and I don't care. Let's walk home together. Let me tell you how cute Casca looks. You might pay her a compliment. To me, this is a defining moment because I think that this was the scene where things locked into place for Griffith. I think that Guts clearly was very important to Griffith. He trusted him with a plan that he didn't trust anyone else with. He trusted Guts to be able to see more of the cruelty of him than he wanted the rest of the band to see. He's entrusted him with higher leadership. He's given Guts a lot already, a lot more than he's given anyone else. Yet, he still felt he needed to have a bit of a facade up for him, and Guts basically called it out and said, you don't need that with me. Let's just go. And I think that this scene was really significant for Griffith in realizing how close they were and how much he really could trust Guts. Like, to me, this is the scene where Griffith realizes, oh, he really is a friend. He may not have a dream. He may not be able to stand next to Griffith in his immense ambition where he would sacrifice it all for one thing. But I think that this is where he sees Guts genuinely as a friend. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreading, but I love this scene. And now it's time. The departure. It's time for him to go. He can't remain buried in Griffith's dream like this. He has to attain his own dream so that he can be worthy to stand next to Griffith, which he expresses to the band and to which he does get feedback. And you know what, Corcus? Maybe you could shut up. There's a lot of really good conversations that happen here that reveal a lot about the characters, but the one I want to highlight is Judo, pointing out that Casca's love for Griffith is more akin to worship for saving her and giving her a future, and asking Guts if he'd like a future with her. His answer was, the one who has her eye is Griffith. That's why, right now, I'm no good for her like this. I don't think that Guts is surprised that Casca is in love with Griffith, and that her eyes are all for Griffith, and that he doesn't think they have shifted it at all towards Guts. I think that just like in the fountain scene, that when Griffith said those things, the visual response we got from Guts is the chasm and the elevation difference that Guts perceived between them, that he essentially agreed, yeah, you're right. We're not equals. I'm nowhere near your level. I think that this is probably similar. I think that Guts understands that Casca would choose Griffith over him. I don't think that he views himself as worthy of even fighting that fight. I mean, he knows I have to go out on my own and discover myself. Like, this is something that I need. But also, I think that he still perceives himself as beneath Griffith. So, yeah, of course her eyes would be on Griffith and not me. I have to go advance myself. I have to go get to a level like that for her to ever consider looking at me. I think he's wrong, but whatever. And just like before, the different ways that the bands react to this news, it shows a lot about the characters and how much this hurts them. Oh, and you know what? Maybe you could shut up, Corcus. But by far, Griffith's response is the star of the scene. He makes Guts stay with him by force the first time, and he's willing to do it again. But this time, out of desperation, rather than from a place of assurance. But Guts has made his decision. Leaving is what's right for him, and he can't stay and feel right about that. So two comrades, two people who care more about each other than anyone else in the world, fight. There's so much to be said in the eyes of this scene. Guts, who's usually excited by the thrill of the battle, is resolved, but calm and even grieving the necessity of this fight. Griffith, normally calm and in control in any situation, is far more spastic and desperate, and his thoughts are as well. I think this is the first time I've seen inside Griffith's mind, and it's in total chaos. He's spiraling in this conflict and working out exactly what to do and how far to take things so that he can win control over Guts once again. I don't think it even crossed his mind that he might not win. And so when he loses, he drops to his knees and he just stares blankly. He's at a total loss for what to do. He lost. He lost his best fighter. He lost his best friend. He lost control. And Guts walks away, having won the battle without having shed blood. He won not by losing himself in the fight like he normally does, but rather by keeping himself stable and control. And as he leaves, his thoughts are on Griffith. He'll be all right. I'm just a rock on the roadside. This is a small setback. You'll get back up. You'll keep moving toward your dream. Just a small pebble. You won't be affected too badly by me leaving. When in reality, everything falls from here. And I guess this is kind of similar to what I was talking about with Casca. I think Guts just really doesn't understand how important he is to the band, to the people in his life. I mean, he knows that this is his family. He knows he's cared about. He knows he's trusted. He knows he's loved. But the idea of walking away, to him, they'll get back up and they'll keep moving. This won't affect everyone. I'm just a pebble. I haven't even discovered myself or made myself yet. But the truth is, his importance to Griffith is so much more significant than he understands. The truth is that not just, his friend is leaving, but also his greatest asset. Griffith is not in total control for the first time in probably a very long time. This kicks off a complete undoing. So now Guts is alone, and he's been with family for so long that loneliness feels like a darkness pressing in on him. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he's throwing away something good. He was so resolved when he was fighting to leave. But now that he feels what it's like again to be on his own, he's questioning what he fought for. And then he feels a presence. One that is way too strong, one that is quite familiar. And it's inhuman. So the gears have indeed begun turning. You, struggler, take heed. 1 year hence shall be the time of the eclipse, and your friends, those yet unseen, of the fleshless flesh, whatever that is, and that unkindly half of yours shall be gathered then in that place. A torrent of madness, a tempest of death for which the human body could never atone, shall sweep over you. But take heed, struggler. You were born from a corpse and began your life from death in the mud. You are closer to death than anyone. Thus, you excel in escaping it. Struggle, contend, wriggle. That alone is the sword of the one who confronts death. Never forget this. In the abyss of despair, only he who stands up with a broken sword in his hand, perhaps. Okay, Guts doesn't know what you're saying, and you know it. I don't know what you're saying, and you know it. I don't think you know what you're saying. You just showed up to jabber nonsense to mess with the kid's mind and then leave into the mist because you know you look cool. I wrote an analysis, not really an analysis. I wrote up some guesswork on this when I was reading through it on the Discord. On how trying to interpret it. I'm not gonna bore you with it. I already did that with Zod. I'm not gonna make you sit through that again with this one. I don't know what it means. I have some guesses. They're grasping at straws. We'll move forward. So cut to Griffith, and he too feels how suffocating being alone suddenly is. And now he's lost control of the person that he was closest with and trusted the most. So he goes to Charlotte. I read him as reckless here. Numb and trying to have control of something. He's rushing Charlotte. I think her body language is clear that this is too fast for her. And she tells him no, but he pushes past it all. And in the end, he's a mess. Clawing at himself again. Wild eyes. He's lost everything. And then directly after this, we have the scene with the king, which I'm sure you can imagine after the critiques I had with the execution of Casca's scene, you might assume that I have some critiques for this scene as well. My biggest issue with Mira's choice of the way he depicts on-page rape is his emphasis on the curves and the body and the angles of the person being assaulted. Don't take me wrong, I don't take issue with him choosing to depict the assault on page. It's the fact that he draws the victim in a sexualized way while they're being assaulted. Like here we have a 16-year-old who's trying to cover herself, but doing a terrible job at it. And there are so many angles. It's the amount of detail, and again, the emphasis on the curves in the way that she's being positioned. And the king's actions aren't glorified at all in this scene. In fact, he's depicted as a grotesque monster, basically. I think that narratively, well, actually, I don't know what the point of the king scene was narratively, but narratively, it's treated as a horrible act, yet it's drawn in a way where the emphasis is on Charlotte and her figure. Mira has made the choice to depict rape or sexual assault or sexual violence on page graphically and frequently in his story. Fine. My issue is in the execution. With Guts, it was on page and graphic and horrifying as well. I think that scene was handled with delicacy and care. And I've read quite a few rapes since then, and I don't think that same delicacy and care has been handled since then. Though there's so much that I love about the exploration of Casca's character and the narrative depiction for her, the visual depictions I think are being handled really differently. And I don't think that the horrors of sexual violence are being depicted well when the characters are being drawn in a way that's emphasizing their bodies and their curves. This is actually a pretty big problem that I'm continuing to have with the story. And I've read past what I'm covering today, so I know that it doesn't get better. So the section ends with everything coming crashing down. He's been captured, his band is hunted down, and he's been condemned to a year of non-stop torture. We end in a pretty dark place for basically every character, or in this section in a pretty dark place for basically every character. I told you in the last video that I would speak bluntly about what I'm liking and not liking, and this story is certainly giving me plenty for both. But I guess what I will say is I'm real nervous for our characters. I don't think we're going in happy places. That's for sure. I mean, it's clear we're not. I read Black Swordsman, but oh boy. That was a lot of story to cover in one video, and it's unfortunate that I ended it on a negative, so, you know, please engage with the positives as well. But please do chat with me more in the comments. I will keep reading, and another video will come out, you know, eventually. These videos take a lot out of me to make, though, so eventually. Soon, but, you know, not the next one. But please do chat with me more in the comments. I'll see you again soon. Bye.